Hey guys, it's Rachel here with Senza Tempo Corso, and I'm out here with Preacher. We're gonna walk over to the stream and have a conversation. There he goes. They've done a lot of tree trimming over here. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys today about is something that's been on my mind for a while. It has to do with breeding in general, and then how that relates to breeding of the Corso, and also bringing that back into talking about the difference between American and Italian dogs. I would even go so far as to say European dogs, since they're bred by so many more people than just the Italians now. So, wanted to have some pretty backdrop for this. Let Preacher get some sun. So, before I talk about the differences between the lines, I want to talk about the history of dogs in general, because I don't think that you can have a very accurate perspective on dog breeding if you don't understand about the history of dogs. So, trying to get out from away from this wind. So, sorry that he's doing that right now, but it's about all I can videotape right now. So anyway, it's pretty well accepted that the domestication of the dog happened during the time that people were in the hunter-gatherer state. And so, you know, we can take a guess and kind of, hey sugars, and kind of, you know, take guesses as to what the dogs are being used for, but most likely probably helping on the hunt, maybe watching over and protecting the family while the men were gone, and probably just keeping other predators at bay. You know, things like bears or whatever that might come in and try to mess with people. So, over time, people started to notice that certain dogs were better at certain jobs, and they started to breed those animals together. And that's called breeding like to like, whether it be physical or behavioral. And what we have found through breeding for behavior is that physical traits oftentimes come along with breeding for temperament. We've seen this in the fox study. On top of color and physical changes, we also have found that the fox study shows that the foxes actually started to breed or reproduce twice a year instead of once a year, which was very interesting. So, that is gross water he's standing in, but whatever. So anyway, you had people that were using these dogs for certain things. They were obviously going to be different based on certain areas. So, you know, you have environmental adaptations based on, you know, if you live in a very cold place, then it's, you know, you're going to have a longer coat. And then depending upon what the dogs were used for, they had different physical traits to help them with that. So, I'll give you an example of how this kind of stuff works out. So, the Border Collie has an extra gene in its brain for, I don't know if the gene is actually located in the brain, it may, but they are more intelligent than other dogs, and you can actually look at that gene and see it and know, okay, well, this is what's responsible for that. The husky, for example, has an adaptation to its metabolism where whenever they are running for long periods of time, their metabolism goes back, it reverts back to basically like an idle. And so it allows them to be able to run for long periods of time without using as much resources as, say, another dog would that is using the same amount of energy. So that's a positive adaptation, much like the Border Collie's adaptation. The Greyhound has a much larger heart, and they also have more blood volume, and they also have a higher muscle mass. All of these things go towards allowing the Greyhound to do what it does best, which is run really fast. You also see this in, thoroughbred racing horses. They also have bigger hearts. So, pardon me. So, breeding, and actually purpose-bred breeding, meaning that you're breeding an animal for a purpose, oftentimes can have really great results, very advantageous results for the individual that help the animals to be healthier and to be able to do their jobs more efficiently, which is awesome, right? That's a lot like how evolution should work. And what we find is that it doesn't matter where the dogs are bred. Preacher over here. That oftentimes when dogs are used for similar tasks, they develop similar phenotype. And phenotype is the basic structure of the dog. So we're talking when you are at a dog show and they talk about the conformation of the dog. That's what they're talking about, is the phenotype. And so a Greyhound, for example, has the phenotype of a sight hound. It's not necessarily a breed trait so much as it is a purpose trait, okay? So all Mastiffs, especially like your large, I wouldn't consider this to be in that realm, but like your English Mastiff and your French Mastiff, both very heavy dogs, we're talking like estate guardian type dogs. They are going to be in their own phenotype, right? In the Mastiff phenotype. So, so we had these dogs that were bred for purpose, that were bred for jobs, and what we found is that we had a kind of controlled version of convergent evolution, meaning that animals that are designed to do a specific job will oftentimes share the same traits, physical traits, no matter where they are, and despite the fact that they may not even be related or even of the same species, because those are the traits that best suit that animal to do that particular job. And so I would go so far as to say breed type is convergent evolution at work, which is really interesting if you think about it, that humans have kind of have capitalized on this. It's actually quite extraordinary in my opinion. And not only is it extraordinary that we were able to do it, but on top of being able to do it, we were also able to do it well. We were able to create really healthy, and I see you, honey, really healthy, productive animals that were truly a masterpiece to see, right? Animals that that have genuine health benefits contrasted to their natural counterparts. So, having said that, that was the origin of your breeds, right? You had dogs that that had certain phenotypes, and those were identified by usually by name. So you had your Mastiff, or you had your Scent Hound, or you had your Coon Hound, or your just a guard dog, or what, you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't necessarily breed. What was more important to describe was the purpose of the dog, okay? And so that's how dogs used to be classified. And there was not so much of a, people didn't focus so much on the genetic purity of the blood. They focused on the phenotype and just the general quality of the animal. So you wanted to make sure that that animal was going to increase the working ability or the purpose of that dog, or the dogs that you were using. So if you had if you were running sight hounds, like if you're out there hunting rabbits, then you're not going to breed your dog to a Mastiff, because that isn't going to help. But let's just say that you had greyhounds, but you wanted to hunt deer, right, or wolves. Then maybe the greyhound isn't quite big enough. Maybe it's not quite strong enough. So then you do cross a greyhound to a mastiff, and now you have the advantages of both, right? You have a dog that is fast, and able to catch up with these animals, but also now powerful enough with the head and the mouth to be able to devastate that prey item, so that it is a more functional dog for what you're particularly needing it for. And so that's where the origin of dog breeds comes from. Now, the problem with what happened comes from the Victorian age. It has to do with whenever dog shows became popular. Now, it is an interesting fact that dog shows were actually, I want to say 10 to 20 years before the registries. So keep that in mind. They were showing dogs for at least 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, before there were ever closed gene pools. Meaning that there wasn't a... even though there were people that had breeds, there were no written, nobody was taking the time to focus so much on genetic purity. It was all about type. You bred dogs that were like each other so that you could maintain breed type and working ability. Now, once dog shows became popular, and I want to say the first one, and this is another important fact, is not only was it popular, so there were 20,000 paying customers for the first dog show, if I'm not mistaken. It was also, it was very, very wealthy people participating in dog shows. So it was something that was a status symbol. And, oh gosh, geez, I'm so glad that didn't hit him. And so it's kind of like a status symbol. And I think that has a lot to do, I think that plays a big part in dog breeding today. And so I believe that in an effort to kind of close in the lines on the dog show, so basically, you know, anybody could have shown a dog technically. So by creating gene pools, so registries, it is a way of saying, this is ours are more valuable than yours. And also, like I said, it also has a lot to do with the fact that it was for profit. There wasn't an incentive for purebred dog registries until dog shows, because I think people realized how much money could be made from dog shows. So like I said, about 10 to 20 years, give or take. I can't remember the years right now. It was in the 1800s. Within 10 to 20 years of the first dog shows, then they started doing registries, breed registries. And that started off with, if you can believe this, all you had to do was bring the dog in and have it evaluated, which is actually the truth for any new breed that's brought into any registry. Even the Corso was that way. When they first started accepting dogs into the lines, especially with the first registries, you sent in a picture. And they're also, I believe it's South African Mastiffs, they did the same thing. They used an appraisal method. Gosh, this wind is just incredible. And so anyway, you know, the idea of genetic purity, well, what it ends up being is they're only as pure as the dogs that are in that line. So, or have been registered at that time, I should say. So, you know, like I said, the American Corso, or the Corso in general, it literally was just people applied. You brought your dog in. If it looked like a Corso, well, then you got papers on it, you know? And then after that, then whenever the AKC started taking them in, then they just went off of the dogs that had already been registered. So there is no, like, distinct, you know, perfect line of purity with these dogs, nor was there probably ever meant to be one. I don't even think that the original breeders of these dogs ever intended that to be the case, nor really anybody that was ever breeding working dogs. It was only ever to breed healthy working animals. You know, as far as I know, and as far as I've seen, there was not much importance put on the purity of blood until recently, until the Victorian era, when it was more just about, I'm better than you. Humans are always trying to find ways of saying that they're better than each other. And dogs pedigree dogs are another example of that. They're really, when people laugh at the whole idea and they say, oh, there are no purebred dogs, well, that's kind of true. And if you want to talk about, you know, well, at least we could talk about that. So we know that back in the day when dogs were being bred for purpose, when they were being bred for work, they did not have the issues in lines that we do today. We didn't have the health issues, and that's because the only incentive to breed an animal was that it had sound mind, sound body, it could do a job, right? That's it. Those were the criteria. But nowadays, they want dogs that look a certain way. It's more about how they look and less about the job they can do and less about the temperament. So on top of the fact that now we have these closed gene pools, we also have people that have been breeding dogs without the same criteria. So we have people that will breed a dog strictly because it won a dog show. And we have people that will breed a dog that they don't care. It's just because they have it and it's whatever they've got in their backyard. And so there are multiple kinds of bad breeders in the world. Just because somebody is breeding AKC show dogs, especially championed dogs, does not mean that they have quality, healthy dogs on their property. It just doesn't. The only way that you know that somebody has quality, healthy dogs on their property is if they've health tested them and if they can show you and demonstrate that the dogs have good temperament. And that they can perform the historical duties of that particular breed. And so, you know, when we're talking about the Cane Corso, I think that it's really important to, if you want to know, you know, what is a real Corso, well, then you need to go through and look at the pedigrees and go all the way back to the very beginning and look at some of the original dogs. Dude, you cannot eat rock. I can't believe I was just sitting there watching you eat rock and I didn't say anything because my brain wasn't working. And so, no, creature. And so, back off. And so, what did I say? Don't you dare try to take that out of my hand. And so anyway, so if the dog can do the job that it's intended to do, then that would have been what would be considered the proper type. For me, what I like to see is the original breed type in my dogs. I don't want a dog that looks too big and heavy to be able to work. And so when you talk about the differences between the lines, that's what I would say, is that there's a different phenotype. So, and you know, it's personal preference. So some people like bigger, thicker dogs, and some people like lighter, more work-able dogs, right? A dog that has stamina, a dog that can actually work for a long period of time, which is not something that a lot of really heavy Mastiff type dogs can do, despite the fact that many breeders will try to tell you otherwise. And so, you know, you'll always see with my dogs that my dogs have a lighter frame. In order to maintain some size, I will obviously always try to bring in maybe a heavier dog and breed it in to a lighter dog to create balance, but I don't breed huge to huge. because I don't care about the size so much as I care about the functionality and the original purpose, which was a large working type dog, very versatile working type protection dog. So, in regards to the differences between the American and the other dogs, generally speaking, a lot of the Italian dogs are smaller stature. There are various reasons as to why people think that is. I would go so far as to say that it has a lot to do with the fact that some of the lines have boxer in them. It's a pretty well-known fact, and that also that in general, most working dogs are actually smaller than modern varieties. So anyway, so that makes a bit more sense to me. There are always going to be Italian lines that do have bigger dogs. So it's not, you know, it's not all one way or all another. In regards to the Italian dogs, I would personally take a guess to say that they most likely have, I would say they've got bull mastiff and boxer in them. From what I've seen, the look of many of the dogs that I've seen. In America, it's pretty well known that they also did some mixing of their lines. They've got pit bull, Rottweiler, and your modern neo-mastiff. And so, you know, some people will try to dispute that, but I mean, if you look at the dogs, you can tell. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you're honest with yourself. It's only a problem if you live in a fantasy that these dogs, that breeds have value if they're genetically pure. And I personally do not agree with that sentiment. I don't think that our focus on genetic purity is actually very healthy. I think that a lot of things about the way that we think about pedigree dogs and the way that we work with them and stuff like that has a lot to do with many other negative things about human nature. So, you know, we have a tendency to be pretty superficial in general, and I think that pedigree dogs can be a pretty good example of that, because we went from breeding for function, right? We went from breeding what's on the inside to now breeding based on what's on the outside. And it's interesting how human nature, how we kind of do that now, where we used to kind of value people for what they offered to society, scientists and explorers, but now we idolize people that are pretty and are manufactured. So it's a manufactured kind of beauty. And, you know, I personally think that that's a problem. I also think it's a problem when, for example, when the Cane Corso was accepted as a breed, one of the things that they did is they outlawed colors that were historically accurate for the breed. So the straw coloration was historically accurate because of the fact that there was mixing with the Ambrosia Mastiff to increase working ability. And so they outlawed that coloration, and you know, other things like not wanting a lot of white on the dogs. Like, they were just very trivial kinds of decisions that were made that further limited that gene pool. And so on top of now no longer breeding for function, and now we're breeding for looks, on top of that, now we've also closed off our gene pool. So we've instituted patterns of breeding that are less healthy, less productive, and on top of that, we've now cut off our gene pool to being exposed to other possibly better genetics, or at least genetics that could help with certain things. And so so it's kind of like being in a pool of water with people who keep peeing in the water, right? And it's like, eventually the water is just disgusting, and there's really nothing you can do about it, right? Because the only thing you can do is add fresh water in and hope to kind of clear it out. But if you never open up, you know, the water faucet to let more water in, then you're just going to be sitting there in pee water wondering why the water stinks so bad. So that's kind of how I feel about a lot of pedigree dogs, especially those that have been bred primarily for show, is that you get people that have put their priorities in the wrong place. They're breeding dogs that most dog men of the past wouldn't have even bothered with. They breed dogs that that have bad temperaments, genetic issues, because they see value in the look of the dog. And so, you know, show breeding gives credibility to dogs that probably wouldn't have had any previously. And unfortunately, they reap the consequences of that. So a lot of purebred dogs have just been completely destroyed by years and years of show breeding. And the boxer is a great example of that. If you look on my page, on my website, I have a whole article about, or a blog post about the boxer. And specifically because of the fact that the boxer looks nothing like its original counterpart. And honestly probably couldn't even do the job of its ancestors. And I don't even think I can pick that thing up. And that's, to me, really sad. But yeah, there's no way. Sit down. Stay. Yeah, nope, not gonna happen. He would have ran right into that. So, and so anyway, so if you look at the boxer history, and you look at the time at which they were recognized as a breed, and then look at the timeline versus when the AKC recognized them as a breed, and when they became popular in shows, you will see a drastic change in the look of the dog towards non-functional traits. And so, and I'll give you an example of what I think is happening. So, clothes have been a part of our human existence for a long time. We all wear clothes. They serve a purpose. In fact, some clothes are highly functional. Shoes, whatever. But then we have, fashion shows. And so you take something that's functional, something that has served the human population very well, and then you make it completely non-functional and strictly for entertainment purposes. And it's called art. And it's non-functional. Nobody really, very few people actually wear this stuff. And it's, for whatever reason, highly prized, highly sought after, and held up on a pedestal, even though it's non-functional. And so, anyway, so that's what I think dog shows are. They are high fashion clothing items. They're non-functional and really serve no purpose other than entertainment purposes. And unfortunately, dogs are the latest to suffer from that, except for the fact that they're living beings, and it's really messed up to do that to them. There are so many breeds now that struggle just to breathe and survive while sitting there still. And that's because of that kind of breeding, non-functional breeding. So you have to ask yourself, is the pedigree dog in danger? Is it even, does it deserve the value that is placed upon it? Is breeding healthy and working type dogs more important than breeding pedigree dogs from fixed gene pools? These are all questions that a person has to ask for themselves. When I was younger, I used to idolize purebred dogs. I used to think that was just, I wanted the genetic purity. I wanted to know that it was authentic and real. And the more I research things and the older I get, I begin to realize that is a marketing ploy. It is not factual. It's not real. It has no genuine value. And in fact, it's probably a little bit of the opposite a lot of the time. I may very well get to a point like many of the breeders that I respect, that where I have, you know, I'll have these dogs, I'll have my pedigree dogs, but I will also probably have a working type dog that is just focused on health and working ability, because the truth is I don't want to have to be locked in a box when it comes to my dogs. If I notice that a dog has an issue, then a genetic issue, I don't want to have to live in that gene pool and hope that I'm somehow cleaning it out. I'd rather be able to outcross to a dog that can increase my dog's working ability without taking away from it. And so it's something that I'm growing into. And so I think that in time we will find that it was wrong to do closed gene pools. I do believe that the way that dog registries should adapt is that they should do like what horse registries do, where you allow for like one registered dog to be able to breed with another registered dog for working purposes, okay? To be able to increase the working ability of a dog and to increase the health of a dog, that people should be able to do this. And they shouldn't be frowned upon for doing it, you know? I saw a guy breeding boxers. There's a guy that breeds black boxers. A lot of people get onto this guy because they say there's no such thing as a black boxer. And while that may very well be true, his boxers look a lot healthier than most people's. And I believe it's because he probably mixes Corso into his lines. But his dogs are healthier. So you have to ask yourself, you know, does it matter if his dogs are mixed if they're healthier than the ones that are not mixed? You know, I don't know. That's something for all of us to decide. If you're one of those people that has to have a genetically pure dog, you know, like, I mean, when I think about that stuff, I think about, you know, we're talking World War II, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's healthy to fixate so much on those kinds of things, those very surface type, superficial things. It should be about what's on the inside. It should be about the purpose of the animal and what it can bring to the table. You know, if Yellowstone went off tomorrow and civilization ended as you know it, and everybody was forced to go back to like a hunter-gatherer type existence, you would want dogs that can work and actually do a job. You wouldn't care if your dog was an AKC champion or not. You would want a dog that could serve a purpose and do the job. And I think that's what's most important. I think that is what will get us to better breeding. That's what creates those genetic adaptations that are a benefit to the breed. When you breed dogs based on looks and on superficial traits, you get all the health problems we've got. So, you know, if you want to ask yourself, well, what's the difference between the American and the Italian Corso, and I want my dog to be pure of blood, well, you're not getting one, all right? You got to find a different breed, because this one isn't. And I'm fine with that. I've got both American and Italian bred dogs. I love them both. I think they both have excellent traits. I think they are no different than a greyhound from one, or a sighthound from one country and a sighthound from another country. They're built the same, they're able to do the same work, and that's what's important to me. Now, any of the dogs that don't fit that, I'm obviously not going to want. A lot of the Rottweiler crosses are square in body frame, so they don't have the length of stride necessary. They don't have the tuck-up necessary to be able to perform the double suspension gallop. So I'm not going to like those dogs. I'm not going to like that cross because it doesn't add anything to the dogs. It takes away from their ability. Same thing with people who breed in modern Neos. I don't care if the Corso was once genetically linked to them. It's not about that. It's about type. It's not about blood. It's about type. And they don't have the same type. So, you know, I'm going to want to maintain the purpose of the breed, the abilities of the breed. Is a greyhound still a greyhound if it can't run? No, it's not. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want a big, heavy Neo, get a big, heavy Neo. Do not buy a Corso from somebody who has Corsos that look like Neos. They're doing a disservice to the breed. So, these are all things to keep in mind. You know, these are all my opinion. I don't claim to be the expert on the subject. I'm exploring through life the same way you are. I'm learning and reading and researching just like everyone else. I leave myself open to learning new things. You should too. You know, the most important thing should be the health and the longevity and maintaining the working ability of any given type of dog. And if you maintain that as your priority, you can't go wrong. If you focus on looks, if you focus on pedigrees, you're gonna run into problems. So you're just going to. If you breed a dog with hip dysplasia just because it's got an AKC pedigree, shame on you. I don't care who you are, shame on you. You don't breed health problems into a closed gene pool. Period, end of story. So I don't care how valuable you think your dog is. And the person who did that knows exactly who I'm talking about. Me and this one breeder, we've really gone toe-to-toe over this. He thinks he's just God's gift to the Corso world, while he blatantly admits that he bred a female with hip dysplasia because she was an AKC champion. And that's the kind of mentality of people in the community. You got those, and then you got your backyard breeders who just don't care. And they're both equally damaging to the breed. So first and foremost, healthy mind, healthy body can do the job right. Take the looks and everything else later. That should be the last thing you think about, is how pretty the head type is and how you know, uniform the head type is for the breed standard. Who cares? The head type isn't what's going to save you when somebody comes and attacks you or your family. And it's not what matters. So people need to get their priorities right. Stop basing everything on looks and perceived value. It's just not. It's not a good way of doing it. It's not a good way of breeding animals. It's not a good way of breeding people. And we already see that. We already see that. Sometimes I wonder about our society, if a lot of our problems are because we've just got people focused so much on who's beautiful and not focused enough on valuing intelligent people with good moral standing. And you know, we need to focus more on what's on the inside, less on what's on the outside. So I hope this wasn't too long for you guys, but it's not something that I can really talk about, you know, on a short little video. It's something that takes more time. Like I said, I think you really need to understand how dogs evolved, how breeds evolved, how type evolved, before you can start to question how a breed should be structured and how a breed should be managed as far as breeding is concerned. It's easy to see why breeds have the problems they do if you look at how differently the recipe was for breeding in the past. You know, we bred good working animals. It'd be no different if you were buying a truck and the people who built trucks never tested the trucks out to see how good they were. How long do you think it would take before the vehicles stopped being able to be a productive machine if you're never actually testing it to make sure it can do the job? If you only make things off looks, you're going to lose functionality. So, like I said, keep that in mind. I wouldn't pay so much attention to where your dogs come from as far as their genetics. I would focus more on, does epilepsy run in your lines? Does hip dysplasia run in your lines? You know, are people breeding unhealthy dogs? Can they identify what good structure should look like? Do they know what the hips should look like? Do they know what the back should look like? Are they breeding for a standard based upon fashion show idealistic ideas that really have no basis in functionality for the animal? Because a lot of dogs are bred to a standard that is actually counterproductive to their health. And you have to be able to know what is healthy for a dog and what is not. And if somebody's breeding unhealthy traits into dogs, then they're probably not somebody you want to buy a dog from. So keep that in mind. You know, anybody can breed a dog. Not everyone can do it well. So I'm going to end this now. Take my dog inside. Y'all have a good day. Like I said, I hope this wasn't too long, but I wanted to touch on it and really give it the time it needed. I'm going to take him inside. Hopefully the wind wasn't too bad. And I will talk at y'all later, okay? You have a good day. Bye.